Welcome everyone to the Aim Big meeting. We have our special guest tonight is Richard Duncan. He's the executive, and correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, the executive director at the R.L. Mace Institute of Universal Design. And we were talking earlier, Ron Mace is one of the founding fathers of Universal Design. So, Richard, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing, and the institute and everything you've and this presentation.
Great, thank you, Karen, very much for inviting me to talk to you all tonight. I do hope that over the course of this we can entertain some questions, and I think between Karen and I we'll try and manage them in the time. I'm sure you may have a lot, and I'm happy to answer questions about images or ideas in any event. So Karen was very nearly right. I'm the director of the R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute, and as well as that, a related institute called the Better Living Design Institute. R.L. Mace Institute has been around for about, let's see now, I have to keep adjusting my timing as time goes on. I think it's 8 years. It emerged from the ashes of what was a federally funded, grant-funded center at the College of Design at North Carolina State University. And myself and the last kind of remaining principal there left and founded this to try to continue all the work we've been doing over the past 15 or 20 years. And that organization does a lot of work in the world of accessibility as well as universal design. We do a lot of regulatory work, ADA compliance, fair housing compliance, and a lot of institutes and training around the world. Better Living Design Institute was founded to focus exclusively in one area, which is the residential sector. It's the one part of the built environment that is unaffected by accessibility requirements, and therefore kind of has alone a market-based flavor to it. And we decided that we need a separate institute to focus just on that and to avoid some of the confusions that have emerged. I'll talk about a little bit in the presentation relative to what universal design is and how it applies. I've been in the business for now over 30 years. I'm officially into my 4th decade, which is a little bit humbling and concerning to be announcing publicly, but it's true. And this talk, I think, sprang from a notice I think that Karen responded to maybe a month or so ago that we'd put out in one of our postings regarding what is our 6th periodic, shall we say, conference in universal design that we're holding next May 15th to 17th in Charleston, West Virginia. And it's, again, focusing on universal design in all of its different manifestations and parameters. And I'll send Karen links to that so you can find out more about that. So we encourage people to investigate. We're actually having a call for presentations now, so we'd welcome people's ideas about what they'd like to talk to others about. And you can register and sign up. A couple more projects I'll mention now, just because I've got you all captive here, that you should know about. And I'll send Karen information about both of these as well, links and so on. One is we're in the middle now of a national design competition that began late last year and will conclude sometime in the first half of 2017. That has its geographic location in Memphis, Tennessee. We're remodeling a kind of a small, not very striking 1960s or 70s single-story home, and adding universal design features to it in the course of the renovation to make it kind of a lifelong home, home for all ages or whatever. And the link will show you some of the submissions and some of the ideas. It'll talk about kind of what we're after. It's kind of an interesting project that, because achieving a UD outcome in a renovated situation is always more challenging and more difficult. We decided we needed to do that to give people a sense of possibility with their own situations. And so, some of you may be in circumstances where you could take advantage of some of this. So I'll send links to that. The last thing to let you know about before I start talking is about the presentation is a new project that we're starting up within a couple of weeks that will bring us into 4 states in the Southeast, able to fund home access modifications for low wealth households with a person living there with a disability. That's new. It'll only last for 2 years, but it'll enable, I think, a lot of people to get some work done that they haven't been able to do before now. So we hope to work with and through local nonprofit home repair, home remodeling entities, organizations on the local level, and provide funding to them and have them do things like whittle down their waiting lists or maybe reach new audiences they haven't been able to reach before. So they're just some of the projects we're working on now that you should know. But again, I'll provide Karen with that information. She can get it out to your groups. But you can find out a lot of current stuff about us now on our various social media. You know, we have Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're on Pinterest. We're in House. Please look for us there, and we will be increasingly updating those and adding postings to those on a regular basis as we're beginning kind of a very active phase in the next year or so.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about me.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
A little bit about some of my organizations and the work that we're attempting now. After Karen and I talked about our conference next year, she said, well, you should talk to our group about universal design. I guess you haven't had a presentation exactly on this topic before, so I'm happy to bring this to you and see what you think. See if you don't know anything about it or haven't encountered us before, we may introduce some new ideas to this, to your knowledge base. So the people may be familiar with, let me see if I can click this properly and get myself rolling, may be familiar with the kind of classic definition of universal design, which Ron and some others attempted to cobble, which is really about designing the designed environment, not just the built environment, but obviously, you know, products and now the world of education and the world of web and so on, in ways that kind of mainstreams functionality. It's all about infusing and integrating higher functionality to increase the ability of lots of people to take advantage of the environment and the design world without resorting to adaptation or specialized design. So it's really getting away from what has been, even to now in most people's minds, kind of these two ideas about normal design for most people and special design for these other poor unfortunates. Really about much more of a generalized transcendent design concept that recognizes a lot about the people we are and the power of our environments in ways that maybe haven't been particularly understood at a high level before. So that was his idea. That was what the idea that evolved over about 20 years until 1997, when the ideas and concepts of universal design were codified into the principles that we have now, which I'll talk about later today. So typically people rest on two foundations when they talk about the need for universal design. They talk about the growth and the high level of persons with disabling conditions in the country. While I don't keep, you know, awfully current on the demographics, it's somewhere in the 60 million range, maybe a little bit higher, maybe trending higher at some point as the population grows. That's a lot of folks, and anyone can kind of agree that. And that certainly is a worthy reason to be producing more generalized and generally usable environments. The other group that people typically look to as being a driving force behind this is the growth in the number of people who are older. And you've all seen charts like this, you know, the dramatic rise in the number of people over 65 and over 85, beginning, you know, a bunch of years ago and continuing now, and probably won't be leveling off unless we screw something up badly until the middle of the century. So we've got a long way to go before we've even achieved this kind of permanent status of high numbers of older people on a continual basis being represented in the demographic cohorts of the country. And so these folks and the growth of those folks and the numbers of those folks also make a big difference because of the functional declines that folks tend to have as they grow older, and they're a worthy topic to be considering in terms of, you know, why we should be paying attention to this now and not in prior years. I will certainly smooth out my use of this in time. Um, and that results in a lot of people's minds this notion that we've got lots and lots of people who at some point in their lives will in fact have a disability. Therefore, should we be kind of abandoning this age-old concept of, some design for them, the rest of the design for us is really designed for all of us, correct? And that's true enough. I think that the number that we use, 70%, is actually pretty low. I think that it's really very close to 100%, unless you're very unlucky and you die of something at a younger age. And any one who lives to an older age is going to experience some disabling condition that will limit their daily activities. And so it really isn't about even most of us. It's really virtuous, again, unless something unfortunate happens. So it really is, the idea of universal design and I think the idea we have in people's minds as we go forward with this is really that it's really about design for everybody, especially at certain points in our lives. And what people were seeing back in the 70s and 80s as the practice and experience of accessible design was just getting going, really. It had been around, the whole idea had been around maybe for only 30 years or so at that point, was that as we were seeing accessibility features done somewhat better, somewhat less, in a less stiff and unmannered way, is that they began to proliferate more in the built environment, and they noticed, of course, that folks with disabling conditions were able to use these particular features that had been put into place, let's say in the 1970s and 80s. But they also began to see lots and lots of other people taking advantage of some of these same features. And this is one place that we get to a universal outcome, is that when you see a feature that may have come into being with accessibility in mind, actually achieves this much broader utility and broader beneficiary group because of the nature of the alteration, the nature of the design feature, and where it exists in the built environment. So you see not just folks who use power chairs or manual chairs, but you see families with strollers and so on. Again, this is not particularly new, but this is really the light bulb that was going off in people's minds back in that point, that they saw something going on they wanted to know more about, and they spent about 15 years kind of trying to understand it until they got to a point of being able to create some principles around it. So broader beneficiary group is one key element of understanding this kind of thing. And then today, of course, with the proliferation of a whole lot of other kinds of mobility devices, we see people taking advantage of these once considered to be just accessibility features that would make use of things like segways and so on completely impossible or very compromised. And so I think that a lot of us owe a great debt to the disability community for making all this stuff happen over the years, creating an environment that is truly more useful to folks, whether you've got a mobility problem or not, or whether you've got some other kind of impairment or not. So hats off to the folks for making segways more useful and usable. Who knows why they chose to use them to go to the market? Maybe it was just beyond the quarter-mile edge for walking distance. Who knows? Anyway, also proliferating, as I think most of you probably have seen yourselves in the past 20 years, has been the explosion in the use of wheelchairs and scooters. It's an industry I wish I'd bought in on back in the front end, because there's so many of them now. And so even then, with models like these, you see people trying to get away from the medicalized looking, institutional looking kinds of equipment, to add some zip to their lives. And certainly the ability for folks who use scooters or need scooters to take advantage of the built environment is again, massively enhanced by the accessibility features required legally to be put into place across the country. And we can contrast, kind of a before and after, if you will, of someone like a poor traveler of 25 years ago or so, who was struggling with a couple of carry-on bags and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder, weighed down and certainly circumstantially disabled at that time by the stuff he's using and the stuff he's carrying. So my hands are less functional, I'm weighed down, I can't open doors as well as I might have been able to, my stamina is probably reduced, all kinds of circumstantial things just because of the stuff I'm carrying. Again, it goes way beyond people's health status or age. It's really about what they seem to be doing at a particular point in time. And again, another industry that I wish I'd taken advantage of long ago and invested in would be the wheeled luggage industry. Everyone pretty much has something like this, and you know, using these and taking advantage of them has been way facilitated by these built environment things that were put into place by the disability legislation of years past. So we all take advantage of these things, and they achieve kind of a universal status as a result of that. And also we have the unintended consequences of, you know, everybody sees the ramps and so on, and even the handrails used by skateboarders and others up and down our environments, particularly in urban places. So, I mean, that's kind of a very short tour through some of the background to this. I'll have some more background in a second, but it really, UD does reflect the understanding that variation in human form and performance is ordinary and expected. It's not something that we should be surprised by or not be planning for. It happens all the time, whether you have a disability or a circumstantial disability. We should just be designing more affirmatively and intentionally for those realities. We tell people to relax. It's hard to relax from some folks' perspectives, but particularly when you've got legal requirements that have impact. But nonetheless, we felt it appropriate to give them some advice in that area. So I think we're justifiably proud and should be for the advances we've made in the past 50 years in identifying and making progress in improving the built environment, improving our understanding of how people use space and products. But it really isn't anything new, human beings designing things to fit the form and function that's required to get things done. It goes back to the earliest days of making tools at all, and it's really progressed since that time. So now we've got the awareness and the technology to do far more. But even back when they were making, you know, adzes and axes and pounding things, we were making these pieces of equipment. These are dug up somewhere in the Middle East, you know, with new handles put on, but you know, that were of a certain size and not bigger, not smaller, to conform to, as much as they could understand then, our strength, our hand grasp, our ability to grab something and use it comfortably. So it's been going on for many, many thousands of years. And if we look at kind of the modern age, those hammers in the upper left, not so different, right? Wooden handle or wooden-like handle, and surely way more technology, way more ergonomics built into this, probably shock absorbing and much more carefully weighted and balanced and so on, but fundamentally the same kind of idea, just enhanced by our ability to understand technology and ergonomics in the human form. And another relatively common item is something like these soft touch scissors from Fiskars, I believe, that, you know, have all kinds of features that we recognize. They have springs that open them up so your fatigue is less. They've got locking mechanisms to keep them closed. They have an open loop, or rather no loop on the top, so that hand size may not be so much of an issue, and a very large loop on the bottom. So it really makes them much more comfortable to use, I think, and much more universally designed as a result of that. So UD did have its origins primarily with two disciplines contributing a lot to it. One was industrial design, which is the product design stuff we've been showing, and then there's architecture, which is in many ways a more reluctant partner, but still the early years of accessibility really spoke loudly to the practice of architecture and how buildings were built. And so I'm reminding folks to, you know, also consider the ancients and how they were actually had some of the modalities and some of the understandings of construction to include things like ramps in this ancient Egyptian temple that were built for particular purposes. But I like to joke with folks that even they understood the importance of allowing people who have difficulty climbing stairs to get into their temples. Now this was obviously built to bring materials up to construct it, but I guess they left it in place, and so now we have this lovely ramp. So ramps went back, I don't know, 3,000–4,000 years. Nothing new. We knew that how to build them and some of the uses they could be put to, and they didn't leave that alone. So they even pioneered, you know, relief hieroglyphics, and I also joke that it's so that their vision impaired priests might be able to read the text that was being put down. But again, using tactile elements for communication is nothing new, and so we're just utilizing it in a more kind of scientific and broadly beneficial, although not consistently. So leaping forward a few thousand years now, we get to the late 19th century and see some of the other kind of pioneering architects are making use in residential settings, like on the left, more open plan design, which we like a lot in the residential sector because of the advances in uses of more mass manufactured materials, building materials, and then kind of modernistic home design, as well as even details like lever handles and nicely designed, ergonomically appropriate located handrails. So again, some of these things began to come into more common use over the past 150 years. And then leaping forward into, I think it's the late 1920s here, with a famous house by a famous French architect, Le Corbusier. Interesting house, very modern design. As you can see, it actually included astonishingly a ramp that goes up to the top level that might have been a beneficial element to folks at the time if they had difficulty climbing stairs, but was really used by this architect simply for drama and for dramatic effect, not really with human use in mind or with that as a cornerstone. Nonetheless, again, these elements are being used again in this time in residential settings, not just in public or commercial type settings or religious settings. So we had the elements, we had some of the components, but we're really putting it together yet, even then. And so we're still building, even today. This is the shame. Whether it's 1 million or 2 million homes a year or something, they're all largely built kind of as if we were in this 19th century demographic where we only live to 47 years old. So single-story homes, two-story homes, not a whole lot of attention paid to the lives of people who'll be living there over the whatever it is, 100, 150 years a home might be around. So finally, in my kind of historic trend, we get to what is the last commission for, I guess, the United States' most famous architect of the 20th century, Frank Lloyd Wright, the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, where he, again, opted for this dramatic interior spiraled walkway that you can see here, that meant you could go from top to bottom or bottom to top without climbing stairs. A wonderful benefit for lots of folks. Of course, he had nothing like that in mind. Couldn't have cared less, I don't think, about stair climbing or not stair climbing. It was really there for drama. So even as late as 1959, we had some of these things happening. Again, proving that we had the technology, we had the design chops. We just hadn't put it together sufficiently in enough places to intentionally include these things as recently as then. So there's that museum. So that brings us back again to this definition, which we think needs to be inclusive. We think needs to indicate that design needs to be integrated at the earliest stages, at least as a functional design. And it's brought me to the point of wanting to modify this, because I think that people see the phrase adaptation thinking that, well, you have to build something perfect and unchangeable at the beginning, else, well, you've really not achieved that. That's maybe true in a lot of cases, but I think that particularly when you think about a residential setting with people living there over time and some kind of dynamics over time, that small kinds of adaptations would be fine in a universally designed home and still have it work quite well from a universal design perspective, a functional perspective. So I like to take that out now, just say that without the need for specialized design. Because specialized design is what adds the cost, it adds the unusual appearance, often stigmatizing and stereotypical appearance that pulls design away from a universal outcome to something different, which may be essential, unavoidable in someone's home environment, but may not have a result that it's universally designed, which is to say widely appealing and marketable to a broad audience. So I will give you now a different historical tour, which is of the more immediate origins of universal design having its basis in the accessibility standard. So that goes back to 1961 and the issuance of the first American National Standards Institute A1 17.1 standard, which exists to this day in its, I don't know, 8th or 9th iteration, which is was the original and is in many cases still the reference point um, for accessibility and accessibility standards for many years, was really applicable primarily to non-residential structures, and still to this day we don't refer to it except in certain circumstances for the residential sector, but is there and has been a counterpoint to some of the other standards I'll talk about in a minute. So after that happened, we had federal laws that came into place in the 1960s and 70s that were requiring incrementally more and more accessibility in federally funded projects or federal office buildings or recipients of federal funding or places that were renting to federal lessors. So things were beginning to turn, but mainly at the federal level. Then the states got into the act and began to pass their own state codes that had accessibility requirements back in the 1970s. A lot of this came about in the 60s and 70s as a result of these civil rights movements that were so prevalent across the spectrum of issues of humanity and fairness and equity, and the folks with disabilities were no less active in making their thoughts known and their needs known and their rights known. So it was really civil rights issues that brought this to the front and that kept us going. Ron was alive then. He was an architect. Got his architecture degree, I think, in the late 1960s at North Carolina State University, and practiced for many years until his death in 1998. But he was part of that movement. He became one of the leaders nationally in the disability rights and the accessibility movement. And as I said a little bit earlier, after about 25 years of people working on it, he and some others were beginning to get this notion that it wasn't about, one design over here and the other design over there for these vastly different groups of people. There was something to this notion that, in fact, everybody could be benefited, or a much larger group of people could be benefited by these design features if we could only figure a way to not have them be so special, look so special, and we're integrated more into the mainstream of design. And that's slowly happened. I mean, after the ADA came out in 1990, and the continuation of federal laws and guidelines over the last 20 years as well, I think people have done a better job in the public sector, commercial sector, in kind of making accessibility features not really noticeable as such, except with certain exceptions, and really much more stuff that's seen as being generally beneficial. This is one of my troubling pieces of slides, so I apologize. It's on some kind of a loop that I can't seem to get it off of. So this is just about me reinforcing some of what I've been saying with a kind of a photographic excursion I took in New York City a while back, standing on a street corner trying to take pictures of folks who were using these what were very crappy curb cuts on a very ill-maintained street corner, but nonetheless we had lots of folks using them. So here's lots of kids. It seemed to be it was stroller day in New York City. So lots of kids in strollers, people with empty and full shopping and laundry carts taking advantage of these curb cuts. Let's see if I get the next one. The guys with a laundry cart with all these laundry baskets using it. So far everybody's able-bodied, or apparently some more strollers. You see that the condition of the curb cut. This is not a terrific curb cut. Nonetheless, everyone seems to be using it and quite happy. And there's finally somebody uses a power chair, one of these scooters going up and down. Let's see what else we have here. We have bicyclists using it and walking their bicycles nice and politely through the intersection. And I think we've got someone else being pushed in a manual chair, taking advantage of this. And so really all those slides to me represent is, lots of folks taking immediate advantage, perhaps not in an extreme way, but in a mild to moderate way. And that's really part of what universal design does, is it pulls people who may not have our classic legal definition of disability, but are still nonetheless affected by and influenced by and maybe endangered by a built environment that may not respond to them well. And all those folks you saw there times 10,000 other examples every day times all the street corners in the country, and you can just see how the net effect has been so vast and useful for so many people. And again, a feature that was once considered an annoyance and expense for this few small number of folks, and why are they bothering us kind of thing. So there's a lot of other kind of synonyms, at least other initiatives that relate well to universal design. And you may have heard them: user needs design, inclusive design, design for all is European, real life design. GE adopted that back in the 90s. There's transgenerational design, kansai design, which is a Japanese Asian concept. All kind of relate to what we're talking about, with slightly different flavors, but I think many of them trying to get to the same place. It's this generalized kind of theory and practice of design that is far more inclusive in its origins and in its result. And now to the confusions, because we hear this a lot, and this is part of what we spend our time doing, is the confusion that the universal design is in fact these other things that are related but just aren't it. I mean, we know that UD came out of accessible design, but it profoundly is not accessible design. You may have heard of visitable design, which is kind of UD light applied to residential. It's not that. It's not ADA compliant design. It's not barrier-free design, which is, I think, pretty much now an older term that is kind of comes about it the wrong way around. In fact, it talks about removing barriers, which in fact you have to do in many cases if you have an existing facility. But I think we're coming at it from the other direction, which is creating, better environments to begin with, not just removing barriers, even conceptually. So as I said before, and as the definition contains, it's not specialized design either. To be truly universal, it needs to be not that, but something that's generally able to be achieved in mainstream built environments, including housing. Nor is it specialized assistive technology, although both specialized design and assistive technology and accessible design may have a place in use the example of a universally designed home if you need to customize it for various people who may be living there or visiting there. And it certainly isn't handicap design. That really was one of the things they were rebelling against, is this notion that it was the special different thing, using a stereotypical term as well. And it's not a new age euphemism. It's not what we're calling all things accessible or assistive or specialized. It is something that's different. And I'm curious going forward just kind of how your work may be relating to this, and maybe we can talk about that at some point. So the 7 principles, I'll show you some examples of this as we go forward. And what's true is that you find that at different points in the design process in different environments, not all of them come into play equally. Some of them kind of have a light touch, and a lot of different home features or even products may be representative of a high level of achievement in one or many of these principles. As I say, I'll talk about this more. And I've alluded to this earlier, but UD has now found its way into a whole lot of different disciplines worldwide. It really is a worldwide phenomenon, including housing, including architecture, landscape architecture, interior environments of all kinds, including office environments, product design, certainly in the field of graphics, education, web design, and transportation, even urban planning, which is my native field. We're slowly trying to get urban planners more on board with how they can be designing the built environment on a larger scale in ways that are more appropriate and accepting of people's lives. So I mentioned it's international. There's institutes all over the world. This is just a tiny representation of the different places that are working on this academically or research-wise, or in terms of promotion and proliferation. Europe, Asia, there's folks in South America, a major group in India that's working on this now. So it's really is recognized around the world as being something that's important to work on. So it began, at least accessibility began back in the early 1960s or late 1950s with a focus, as it was for many years, on commercial environments, not on residential environments at all. And an image like this with a guy in a manual chair sitting at the bottom of a set of stairs uh, was kind of one of the archetypal images, and someone who was denied access from point A to point B because he couldn't climb stairs or found them dangerous and had to do without or be seriously inconvenienced. And that, you can see a picture like this probably in lots of places around the world today. Nowadays, you can't build anything new that is quite that strikingly discriminatory. But for many years, a solution like this was considered great. It was considered really a terrific thing that this storekeeper would have been thoughtful enough to put a ramp out there in the middle of the sidewalk in kind of a horrible line of stores because it did provide access after all. None of the other store owners saw fit to do that. So this is a good thing. And thankfully, we've been able to go way beyond that in our appreciation of what a more accessible, more universal environment might be looking like. So today we have, thankfully, probably thousands or millions of kind of business entrances, building entrances that, are step-free, that are in fact the exact main route of travel for everybody, not just a special group of folks, and may have far more accommodating doors and doorways than might have been considered before. So, a place like supermarkets with the automatic opening doors make a big difference if you're bringing your own chair with you, if your hands are burdened by packages, if you're pushing something that's heavy and you can't make that work. If you're older, maybe you're relying on the cart itself as kind of a semi-mobility device and don't want to be wrestling with hinge doors and heavy doors. If you're pushing stuff on a two-wheeler, if you've got packages or produce or something, all these folks are benefited by this. And surely initially, these automatic doors were much less about the variety of human condition, if you will, coming and going. It's really all about selling more food, right? Which is fine. You can sell more groceries if you have a more accommodating environment. And we've seen in many cases how this kind of logical economic argument has been played out time and time again. So in this case, they've got to a universal result from a completely different perspective, nothing to do with accessibility, it had everything to do with selling more product and making their stores more attractive. And it got to a point, this tipping point, where you couldn't build a store. You can't build a lot of new buildings now if they don't have these kinds of features, because people say, why am I coming here? I can go someplace else down the street that has a much more accommodating entrance or interior or product selection and availability. This is a case of someone having, what is likely a temporary health problem. I hope a temporary health problem that's also not having to shift their weight to open a hinge door that might be heavy. So anyway, we have seen UD kind of arrive on the scene now again from the accessibility perspective in many cases as people gotten better at incorporating this, and also from totally different sectors. And we'll see some examples of this over the next few minutes. Yeah, I think I'm doing okay. All right, so there's principle one, equitable use. It's my favorite principle. It's the principle that under guideline D says, must be appealing and marketable to a wide audience. That's really the distinguishing feature between that and things accessible. It's the element that by definition kind of takes things away from the specialized design and different design realm and puts it firmly within the mainstream. And we've done, I think 3 dozen are about to have my 37th demonstration UD home go up. This is the one in Memphis I mentioned, or this is a house we did in New Jersey. It has a nice wide front door and it has a level entrance outside that. It's got something of a cover over the doorway. It also has a hinged leaf. It's got a side light that lets people from inside look outside at any height, but it also opens up to make it even more convenient for more folks doing more kinds of things. And oh, by the way, maybe if you got some kind of disabling conditions and use some equipment, you can widen that for them as well. This is a feature in homes that we used to promote strongly, and that it still is a good idea, but we've backed off of pushing it hard in a residential setting, except in certain circumstances, because we found that it just didn't have the kind of fundamental appeal that some other features had. So, but it's a good idea nonetheless. And it's just a full back doors underneath a sink of a base cabinet. So you're not adjusting the counter height or the sink height, but you're letting someone who can't stand for maybe as long as they used to sit on a stool and enjoy what might be a very important, meaningful activity to them with in this case, a grandchild. So you kind of are promoting this intergenerational activities as well as people being able to maintain all the activities of family life that they've been used to and would prefer to do. I would still vote for this as a great kind of custom feature in homes for folks who kind of have some vision to it, but it's a difficult thing to promote on a mainstream kind of production housing basis, which is really the gold standard for us. If we can get production home builders and production home buyers to buy into features, that's really when we know that we've won something. So we show this, an image like this to folks just to keep this in mind. But we bounce back to the outside world. This is a terrific kind of universally designed park in North Carolina that's got a lot of neat features. This is one where you've got a sandbox that happens to have some knee space underneath one end of it, so a kid can climb up there, crawl up there. Parents or kids can stand where that gentleman in the chair is sitting. It allows all kinds of a wide variety of interactions and postures that might be more appropriate. So it just, again, allows either adults or kids, grandparents, and so on to be interacting in a way that's natural and appropriate. And fully integrated, so it doesn't call attention to itself. Here's a feature that I wish would take place in more places. They're trying to figure out how to get a visceral experience to folks who may be blind, who may not be able to get down to the water's edge and kind of splash their hands in or experience this lovely pond. And so they built this kind of descending submerged ramp and sitting area into this lake in Japan, I believe it is. It's become a very popular feature, and again, had its origins as maybe thinking about accessibility, but it clearly has got tremendous universal design potential to it. I'm not seeing any questions come up here, so I'm guessing people don't have any yet. Principle 2 is flexibility in use, and it really does work well if you're thinking about it intentionally from the beginning also, because you don't want to limit what people can do any more than you want or need to. And this is one example of dozens and dozens of different kinds of bathroom configurations that people have come up with over the years to kind of figure out how they can be more accommodating. So in a particular space. So this is the case. You've got a standing shower that's available to people. You've got it as a roll-in shower, curbless shower, we say now. You've got a bench people can sit on or use for whatever purposes they might use a bench in a shower. You've also got a tub. You can sit, you can transfer, you can stand, you can roll in and shower. So it has this flexibility of multiple purposes over time, multiple functions. People in a variety of personal circumstances might find this to be useful. So it's got a lot of flexibility. Almost don't have to mention it, but the kinds of door handles we have now are so much more easy to use than they were in the old days, and allows people with any level of useful hand function or arm function, to open doors easily and independently. One thing we haven't solved as well, although frankly that's getting better and better, is the issue of door weight in many buildings, where you may be able to use the handle, but if you've got any strength or balance limitations, sometimes the weight of the door itself is a problem, and you do have to go to that special door that is got the accessibility paddle there. Okay, so we got this now. Okay, so another flexible design. It's an interesting thing. One of my partner Leslie saw this at National Airport. May still be there for all I know. It's a customer help desk, and it's got high-ish counter, not too high, and the lower counter that's adjacent, which you can see, for accommodating, I think, seated visitors and airport users. It also happens to serve as the gate getting in and out of the little work area back there. So it has double functions. It has semi-security. There's a gate there, but it also works as this lowered counter with knee space. That's very effective and efficient. I think it's a nice design. Often people ask me about flexibility in terms of adjustability and height, up and down. And I'll talk about this more later on, but we know that the office chair industry has got that message strong. But wouldn't it be nice if, your sink in your bathroom or your kitchen can do that? Well, a lot of you probably know you can do that now. You can buy hardware that'll make that happen. You can get sinks that go up and down, I'm pretty sure still today. It's very costly and not always the best solution, but you can actually make that happen. And it is highly effective and highly flexible if you can afford it and if you have some utility for it. So we like that kind of flexibility. In today's increasingly kind of technology-oriented and driven world, the requirement for having things operate simply and operate in a way that's intuitive, I think, is becoming much more important. In this case, we're looking at what is still a current model of a slide-in range from GE that's got knobs on the front. We like knobs now. We're not such big fans of these undistinguishable membrane switches, which are still present in the center console of this thing. We like smooth-topped ranges because they're so much easier for so many people to slide things on and off. And high-tech ranges now also can limit some of the danger from burning. But it lacks one element that's isn't always found in your ranges or even stovetops, which is some relationship between the knob and the burner that it controls in a way that makes it impossible to misunderstand or less possible to misunderstand which knob controls which burner. And there's all kinds of devices that have been sought out, with some connected lights and things like that, but it seems to be a continuing and ongoing issue that people are continually mistaking one knob that goes to another burner, and it seems like a simple thing to solve. We've had trouble, but this arrangement clearly is one that works well. So simple and intuitive. We've even begun to take a look at wayfinding kinds of issues, and this is the case with, what do people do when they're in unfamiliar environments? How do they orient themselves in space? And even with GPS, we can often get confusing results in urban areas particularly, but how do you make that happen? There's lots of, low power, Bluetooth type, radio frequency things that people have talked about to help you orient or learn what's inside a store, but also the use of some kind of very distinct wayfinding mechanism. Like, you may not approve this color, hideous kind of pink and purpley red or something. But just we use this as an example to help people think about UD at different scales, not just in office environments or on campuses, but how do you reckon this on a scale that is the urban scale, and particularly for the people who are most vulnerable, which is folks who are new to an area, maybe folks who might become confused and can't and disoriented. Maybe they can't use GPS in the same manner. So scale matters in this. So moving on now, principle for perceptible information. Different from simple and intuitive, it means that can you even understand and apprehend information that's being presented to you? Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you touch it? Is it legible? Is it understandable? And this gets into the whole area of signage and information communication on that basis. This slide is actually from an office building in New York City that focuses on low vision issues, and they tried a particular scheme and wayfinding scheme where they had very large, very distinct graphics designating different kinds of rooms and stairway designations that were different. So restrooms always had a blue triangle, and stairwells always had a big red rectangle. So they had lots of redundant information provision. All the signs had graphics, had text, had braille. They pioneered the use of these low power radio systems so that if you were hooked into this and picked one up, you could go by an office and it would provide you information about what the space was or what it was used for. So this is the kind of technology that's really still taking off and still has a lot going for it. The principle 5 is tolerance for error, which is important. It really has to do with safety and the built-in safety for this. And things like detectors that keep the elevator doors from closing on you are great for everybody. They're really great if you're carrying packages, if you've got small children, if you can't move as quickly, perhaps, if you've got a large object you're moving, which is maybe you in a wheelchair, and it helps protect us from, again, these consequences of accidental or unintended actions, which are so often the result of errors. I'm not sure whether this plainly leads us in the direction of things like driverless cars or not, but we may be heading that direction anyway. This is a statue that's on the campus of NC State that is kind of an iconic thing because it's very noticeable, very easy to distinguish. It's got this, this bright stainless steel exterior mounted on this circular pedestal, which is where everybody goes to sit. Classes meet out there. You meet someone to go for lunch. It's kind of a standard place that people go to. And the seating area has an unintended consequence. It also is somewhat protective in that if you're low vision or you're blind, or if, like the rest of us, you're just inattentive, which is where most accidents come in, you're not going to walk your way into that accidentally and hurt yourself, particularly on some of the sharp edges. So it was, again, I think made for other reasons, but it really has it acts as a good example for how you can build a tolerance for error into the built environment. There's lots of other cases like that and how you would do that. So low physical effort, principle 6. We see this in a variety of areas, but including things like this. This is the example of one of these touch-free faucets. That now we have touch-free everything in restrooms now: toilet flushing, urinals, paper towels, soap dispensers. And it's often amusing these days to see people in unfamiliar bathrooms kind of figuring out which things are touch-free and which things aren't, because they're not always reactive in the same frequency that we're used to.
And this brings up something else, Richard.
Hello?
Yeah, it's Karen. Somebody had written earlier.
I can't hear. If someone's talking, I can't hear them. Anyway, these are developed for reasons entirely other than for ergonomic advantages for users, just like the doors in grocery stores. They were developed to save water because they're metered, developed to save energy because they have a set temperature, developed to reduce maintenance because there's nothing you can adjust on them and bang and hit them and break them. So they worked great in commercial settings, and they're so good that they're migrating into the residential environment now. In fact, we gave an award to Delta Faucet a couple of years ago from Better Living Design Institute because they were the first company to migrate that technology from the commercial sector to the residential sector. And we thought that was an important thing to be recognized. And again, they're marketed today for reasons other than ergonomics. Nothing to do with hand function or reach or even safety for temperature settings or something. It's always for the convenience of if you've got stuff in your hands, which is fine, but it comes to a UD outcome from another place, and they have a hard time marketing that in its UD features. They find other things that are people respond to more vigorously. And I see some questions here. I guess I don't know that I can see all of them. It talks about public bathroom sinks, figure out how to get the water that come out when the controls are touchless, right? Right, that's one of the issues with touch-free faucets and or touch-free anything, is that you're never sure if it's just not responding in time, if it's broken, if the batteries are low, and it does produce a feeling of confusion and sometimes embarrassment as we're struggling to figure out what it is. And it may be that they're all on the front end of this technology curve, and so eventually they get much more reliable. That tends to be what happens. And they may decide that, in fact, it doesn't reduce maintenance as much as they thought, revert to the manual things, which will make me unhappy. But nevertheless, there it is. All right, let me get this. Click there. Okay, so low physical effort. Again, lever handles, just like the loop handles, which are flexible. Lever handles also flexible, also a representative of low physical effort. You don't have to pinch or grasp around a knob and twist that way. You can use your elbow, you can use your hand, you can use your finger strength, whatever you've got going for you. In my house, we changed out the door handles on the two doors that mattered the most to us, which were the two entry doors to the house. Chose not to do them on the rest of the doors because we simply didn't have the need for those. But it's one of these things where we may not even require them, believe it or not, in our entry-level homes that we designate with Better Living Design because they're so easy to add. We're much more concerned with the fixed-in-place things, the hallway width, the functionality of the features on the main level, the entrance, and so on. So we love them, but in a residential context, we don't always require them at the front end of projects. Yeah, so again, it addresses issues of aging as well. So how am I doing here? I think I have to pick up my pace. Principle 6, also low physical effort. In a setting where I can see people, I ask folks about how many folks have tried these ergonomically designed keyboards and why more people don't use them since repetitive motion syndrome seems to be so common. But they don't seem to have caught on huge, perhaps sufficient to continue people manufacturing them. They seem like a good idea and maybe the kind of thing that might be introduced more widely to prevent some kinds of, these repetitive motion issues. So maybe people have an opinion about that. They can chime in on the chat or ask a question. So size and space for approach and use expands the scale of the slightly from products where we talk a lot about to the environment the products may be placed in, like a bathroom or a toilet room, and essentially poses the situation where it's fine if you're designing a thing that works, a stove that works, a faucet that works, a sink that works well, a TV that you can actually use, but don't forget about providing the opportunity for people to actually get to those things and use them in the built environment, whether it's in a public setting or in a residential setting. This shows our friend Scott, who's just demonstrating the space you'd like to have next to a toilet. You folks know about all this stuff, even in a residential setting, so that for him or for others who transfer sideways, that makes a big difference. So here we see our nice doorway coming up again for size and space for approach and use. As I say, many features are exemplars of multiple different principles. At least this just happens to work really well from those two perspectives. So that's my focus tour on the principles. I've now got a bunch of slides here, maybe 40 slides on homes and housing that I'm happy to bring to you that maybe you'll see some resonance in. So here we see what it looks to be a sturdily built ramp on the front of a home that, with some exceptions, you get open risers and insufficient handrails on the stairs, but nonetheless, I'm sure this ramp makes a big difference in the lives of the people who live in that house. Both the individual may have a mobility problem as well as people who are assisting. But it's a home feature that will be torn down when the occupancy changes, that will affect the sale price of the house negatively because someone's going to have to factor in taking that away and the cost of doing that, because it's just not a thing that adds to the permanent stock of more accessible housing in the country. It's clearly an add-on. It's clearly kind of the antithesis of the mainstreaming element of universal design, even if it does provide increased accessibility for folks. And it's a terrific introduction to an example of, okay, this is an accessibility home feature. It's not a universal design feature, which would be a feature which is not removable for starts and was designed in to begin with. So this ramp also, by the way, has one of the constant features that all ramps exemplify, in this country at least, is that there seems to be an unwritten rule that it can never be painted, certainly painted in a manner that matches the home. And I understand how pressure-treated lumber needs to be aged, but they seem to stand like that and age themselves and never be painted probably. So there's just no way that most ramps wind up looking good or working well. So this is just one of many shots that shows a house that was designed intentionally to begin with, that has universal features. You can see the stairs going up. You don't have handrails on it, but they do reach a porch that is level with the first floor. It happens to be a one-story house that has all its prime function areas on that level with a big wide porch, traditional and kind of southern architecture and design in many ways. And to the left of the staircase, a little gently sloping pathway that brings you up to the staircase and also conforms happily to the existing grade of the house lot, which goes, up from right to left. So it's kind of hidden, not very distinct and distinctive, built in to begin with, accommodates, all kinds of users. Lots of folks prefer stairs, that's fine. But it also, if you can't climb stairs easily or safely, it allows you another route to get up there. And you could add handrails to either one of those. Again, you can do small adaptations that make it more functional, but you don't have to tear up the front of your house to make those kinds of changes. That's why we allow adaptations, and don't necessarily have to have every single accessibility element in place day one. Another way to get in homes, which solves one of the problems your slide before solved, is through the garage. And we don't, in our criteria for better living design, don't insist that every entrance to a home be accessible, but one has to be. And the house you saw before, let's see if I can go back. Can I do this? Has this big porch roof over the step-free entrance. And pretty much any place you've got a step-free entrance, you've got to have a porch roof. There's no way to avoid that because the water infiltration issues are just too pronounced. There's ways you can mitigate it, there's ways you can get around it, but there's no way you can actually solve it permanently and affirmatively. So having a porch roof over your step-free entrance works out well. A garage obviously accounts for that too. We don't have any problem with people using garages. It tends to be the way in many, many homes with attached garages that 90% of the foot traffic in and out of the house goes. And so that's a perfectly appropriate location to add your accessible entrance. And obviously it's a weather protected entrance as well. So you've got, happy shoppers coming home. You've got movers who will love you for having step-free entrances. And here we go again. We've got our two entrances here, our entrance from our New Jersey house back again to show you how that works. Here's a house that another demonstration house we did in North Carolina that is a great example for us because it actually got one of our BLD awards because they did such a good job. We consulted with the builder on it, as it turns out. It's a house that true to the vision of universal design, looks like all the other houses in the neighborhood. We like to say you can make your house look as odd as you want to, but it can't be because of universal design, because A, you don't need to, and B, we don't need any more trouble than we already have. We have enough confusion over what UD is without burdening it with the requirement that it make houses look weird from others. So you can really make a UD house look much like, if not exactly like, other houses in the neighborhood, including the feature of having stairs on the front. As I say, we don't hate stairs. We don't require the elimination of stairs, but you can have a stair both for looks and both for familiarity, and that works well, but you just have to have one way in the house that doesn't require using stairs. In this case, the stairs is what we would think of kind of as the formal entrance to the house, maybe used at Thanksgiving with a postman or something, probably not used day to day by most of the people who come and go from the house, which again is fine. It's a two-story house. As you can see, it doesn't have access to the second floor, which is also fine. We don't require every single space in the house to be accessible from day one. In this case, the only room that's upstairs is like an office space, which, while useful and convenient, is not essential for people's lives to be continued in this house. And here you see a floor plan of the first floor of the house. It shows up in the upper right-hand corner the master suite with a large shower and the ample-sized bathroom. On the left-hand side, the guest bath, the auxiliary bath, that I'll show you some slides of later on. And it shows you also this breezeway between the garage and the main part of the house, this gentle sloping pathway that goes from driveway to covered porch, which is at the same level as the first floor of the house. So we're working ourselves around counterclockwise the house. You see the garage. It was a collaboration with a bunch of organizations, including AARP North Carolina, and the breezeway that goes from driveway up to the front porch. And there it is. Okay.
Oh,
so here's a close-up of the porch, the breezeway, the stairs. Again, front porch level with the first floor. And this is a shot from inside. Actually, I'm about to show you a shot from inside the house with a low profile threshold. They didn't happen to have lever handles on that doorway, but could be easily changed if they needed it. Here's a house I showed you at the front end when I was talking about traditional ways of building homes. And this clearly has, lots of stairs going up to the entry door without handrails, of course. That would would muddy up the looks, I suppose. It's actually a trick picture because while it does appear to be a house you couldn't get into if you couldn't climb the stairs, actually it has a secret route that comes in from the driveway on the side that's level with the first floor, so you can actually work your way around to this front entrance and then get in, which is great. You don't have to have an absence of stairs. You just have to have one way to get in. If you're clever, you can usually figure out a way to do it. A lot of people around here say this. People might know that I've relocated world headquarters at UDI from Chapel Hill, North Carolina to Asheville, and I've already begun hearing as I've made the rounds of folks about how difficult it is to achieve universal housing because of all the slopes they've got in the homes. And I keep telling people that really the worst site for me to work with is a flat site. I much prefer a site with some grade change where you can work with the grades to get your way into one or another door without having to move so much dirt. With flat sites, you may wind up with a nice looking house. This happens to be a house in a very special subdivision in near downtown historic Tucson, Arizona, that has a lot of kind of a traditional kind of adobe style, I guess, designs with stucco on the outside and a covered entrance, connected to sidewalks and little walkways between all the homes. And this is, unfortunately, there's too many single-story homes in this subdivision, but you could have two-story homes. But nevertheless, this is a slab-on-grade construction, which makes it simple, low to the ground, in a place where you don't have much rain, like Tucson. That kind of thing, I guess, works out pretty well. But you can adapt UD, as I say, to kind of any style house you want. It really is a-stylistic. So gets a little bit into the weeds. I don't want to bore you with some of the details of this. I know that time is marching on, so I'll continue to make progress here if we get through this. But you can have a variety of ways to achieve your outcomes of having a step-free entrance without having to resort to ramps. So moving dirt is a good idea. You can do that in new construction and renovation. Here's a case where you've got, retaining wall that serves to keep the earth away from the foundation of the house, which is always important. You have an earth berm on either side of the sidewalk leading up to the front porch, which is level with the first floor, which is also covered, and you have drainage swales on either side of the front porch that let water run away, which is always a key consideration when you're doing this kind of work. This is a project by a friend of ours from Maryland who did just that. This was an entrance that had steps going up to it without a roof cover. And he poured a new porch slab so it's level with the first floor, covered it with a roof with these nice columns, added a sidewalk with earth berms on either side. The porch itself kind of kept the earth away from the foundation of the house. It works out very well, and this is a renovation situation, including in the north where you have snow, so it obviously worked out. Another feature that's neat and as a package shelf, we've also backed away from this more these days. And we like package shelves. We like package shelves more as furniture than as things attached to walls. But it just points up this universality of people walking up to homes with their keys and their pocketbooks, their arms full of groceries. Where do you put them? How do you need someplace to do that? And if you can't bend down as easily or facilitate as easily, well, it makes even a bigger difference. So it looks like Karen's asking who did the design of this house, but I don't know which house because I just saw that message. And I'll be happy to tell you when you describe the house to me. So we're talking big stuff, siting on a lot, the kinds of grades you're looking for, moving dirt around, and then, back down to small things like handrails. And, you folks deal with this all the time. So you see handrails that are 2x4s, and you see handrails that are 2x6s, and you don't always see handrails that are actually accommodating to a hand. So just a reminder to everybody to add those to stairs whenever you can, inside and outside, in the right shape. And I've spoken disparagingly of ramps as good examples of universal design. I shouldn't speak disparagingly of ramps in general because I've designed and built many of them, but they just rarely achieve a universal outcome. So we reserve them for that category of home feature, which we call accessible home features or custom home features, but just not universal home features. So this is a Habitat house in Minneapolis that actually incorporated a ramp in a semi-permanent fashion. So I'm forced to bring this to you in with
Yay.
all honesty here, um, and show you that they've converted part of this porch to an inclined surface, no proper handrails or anything, but there's weather protection there somewhat from the Minnesota snows, I'm sure. And by the time you get up to the top level, it's level with the first floor. It's covered by a roof overhang. So all in all, not bad. If you can do something like this, it brings you closer to achieving a universal outcome, um, even if it is a much more steeply inclined slope surface, which is, admittedly a problem for some people, even a slope like that. So Karen, I think I see this telling me that this is the first universal design house. Yikes. Well, I have no idea which one that was.
Uh,
Um, uh, that may, I don't know if that was the one in probably the first one was the one in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm
right.
having trouble hearing. If anyone's talking, I apologize. I can't hear a blessed thing. I may have toggled the wrong thing there, but and I don't. It was probably the staff at the Center for Universal Design who designed it, along with the builder. I don't remember if there was an architect involved in that particular house. Um, yeah, a lot of these were designed with builders, um, as it turns out. So the accessibility standards, moving on. There you go. Uh, you know, are things which a lot of folks are prone to rely on. If they don't know any other thing, they got, we got the ADA standards, we have ANSI or something, and they look to those books for the things they might want to include in a residential environment. And I'm always very cautious saying, look, please, you can use them as reference points, but don't take, feature A that's for public building and apply it to feature B. An area where that doesn't hold true is really in handrails in many cases, because we like the provisions on handrails, what they're prescribing them, where they should be located, and even these kinds of features that are no longer required, by the way. I mean, you don't have to have a horizontal run out at the bottom of a set of stairs the way you used to, but we still like that feature because it does give folks with any balance issues an opportunity to get off the staircase, steady themselves, and then step off. And this is one of our demo homes in New Jersey. Um, and to provide continuous handrails is also not something that's always adhered to. It's often much simpler for a builder or an installer just to put in, handrail segments and have them separated by some gap in it, which may be okay for in some cases, but for a lot of folks it may not be. So a continuous handrail makes a big difference in those cases. Let's see here. Okay, this is another demo house, which is very unusual. It's a two-story house that doesn't have an elevator or an elevator shaft in it, but it does have a straight run set of stairs, which we know is so much easier to add a lift onto. So, and we would include this in our in our pantheon of universally designed homes in a certain manner, because we designed the second floor also with wider doorways and a more usable bathroom. So folks could get in the first floor via step-free entrance, and you're looking at the back of the house from the front door now. It's got no bedrooms downstairs. It does have a 2-fixture bath that could be converted to a 3-fixture bath. It's got kind of an open kitchen, but you could add assistive technology. And for sure, that's going to be added for a particular person at a particular point in time and will be removed when it's no longer needed. So it's not universal, but it does allow people access to the second floor if they needed to. We have the lever handles. You've seen them before. An easily forgettable element in home design, whether you're renovating or otherwise, is where do you locate the controls, where do you locate the electrical panel, the heating and ventilating controls, security systems. They all need to be at reachable points, which unfortunately brings them sometimes within range of kids who really shouldn't have access to that. So it speaks to the need to balance residential issues of safety, security, and convenience and independence. We've seen our sinks before, and here's an image again, another one of the houses we did, of that notion of space for approach and use, where what you want in a lot of cases is kind of this amount of space in a residential bathroom. You'd like to have a toilet in the corner. You like to have both right and left-handed toilets, but you like to have a toilet in the corner. You'd like to have space next to it, and everyone screams when they see images like this because it reinforces their stereotype that, oh, these bathrooms are so big and they're austere looking and they're bland and they're empty and they take up extra space, and extra square always means additional cost. And you're killing me is what these people say, especially if I don't have a market I think I can sell it to. And we are careful to show them how you can take an ergonomic mandate and a lifelong living mandate and actually make it work for you. We'll show people slides like this, which you all know, and we'll show them slides like this, which show what happens after an interior decorator gets through with it. We can have a temporarily located piece of movable furniture with all the storage for toilet paper or whatever next to it with plants on top, make it look nice. And when it needs to go away, it goes away in 2 seconds. So it's not wasted space any longer. It's always usable somehow. So we show people, we've done projects at all price points to demonstrate the efficacy of it. So we've done habitat homes, we've done kind of $1 million home additions, and this is a very nice curbless shower with an early version of a trench drain in there with brass or gold fittings and stone or very, very nice tile. And you can, and these days I'm told that curbless showers are kind of a hot commodity in a lot of people's homes because they connote potentially high style, European styling or something like that, which is great. People attract it. You sell UD on the basis of high aesthetic content. We're all about that. So you can achieve that obviously more easily in a high-end home with more particular aesthetic features. So someone's asking about having floor plans that you sell. Okay, we don't. We'd love to get some kind of a grant that will let us update our old floor plans. There are very few companies that do that, and certainly not really UD necessarily. The floor plan companies will give you kind of a basic floor plan. You'll have to work out some details. I can forward to Karen a couple of names and places later on if she reminds me. Okay, moving on. We're getting towards the end now. So this is our three-way bathroom again. We've seen that before. This is another bathroom. The left-hand image is a three-way in a different home. In that same bathroom, if you turned around, we also included, this is an early version of what we thought would be a universally saleable element, which is, again, these slide back doors under a lowered counter. And we discontinued advocating that vigorously as a mainstream product because we just didn't think about that enough people would raise their hands and vote for that. So we decided that having to adapt a cabinet is such a smaller item than having to break your door open and provide a new shower and so on, that relatively speaking, that we're content with providing people with standard cabinetry to the extent that nobody was doing customized homes. So we do allow that. Another three-way bathing, another house with handheld showers, which we like a lot, of course. We don't spend that much time on an area that deserves more attention, which I knew more about, which is lighting and then visual cues to help prevent accidents and make people feel more comfortable. But at one time, this was during the proliferation of this solid surface counter revolution that's now been supplanted by the granite countertop revolution, where we could incorporate all kinds of interesting visual cues to distinguish counter from sink. Pardon me. And this is an example of one of them. You can do this on the counter edge as well. If you got folks with visual impairments, those kinds of treatments and features, where you guys probably done this a lot. So, but I guess my point is you can have kind of a universal feel to it, not just an assistive or a remediation kind of an issue. So this is another bath. This is the second bathroom in one of the houses I pointed out. We had the floor plan of where they kind of went overboard. This ceases to be a universal bathroom and ends up being a bathroom with way too many features. They thought that if a grab bar was a good idea, some places that what was it, 2, 4, 5 grab bars would certainly be a terrific idea. And my sense is these are all kind of ADA placement kind of grab bar locations that may conform to nothing that anybody wants or needs. And if it was a mainstream house being sold to mainstream households, prefer this. This is the kind of thing that they wouldn't like to see. So my advocacy is for bathrooms to be designed without grab bars, but with blocking so that they can be installed later on. So they have the grab bars and the seat, and they have, one good thing, which is the shower, handheld shower mounted on a grab bar, which makes the thing that people might grab when they're falling more sturdy, as well as an offset set of controls that makes bending and reaching in to adjust the temperature easier as well. So we take pains, and I won't go through these in detail with you all here today because we're getting near the end here. I want to leave a few minutes for any other questions. That there's many kinds of configurations of bathrooms that can work well. It's not just a simple rectangular bathroom, particularly in renovation situations, but even in new construction where you can take advantage of existing space, oddly configured space, and still have it work out in a superior manner. So you've got a not huge curbless shower here with enough space inside once the door is closed to maneuver around. Let me see if I can get this to go. Oh, here we go. Hang on. All right. And, almost T-shaped situations, just a reminder to expand your thinking beyond just simple square or rectangular shapes as room configurations. This shows up now in my world, kind of an infamous Japanese bathroom that was trying out, admittedly, some additional advanced features, but this is kind of like the opposite of our design things in a way that's simple and intuitive, because you walk into this bathroom, you're not sure what you can do anywhere, whether what you're doing with any of these devices is totally obscure. And while it is kind of a joke, and I'm being a little bit unfair to the designers, still it is kind of a cautionary tale about how far you can let technology go, which the Japanese are crazy for. Witness all these things here. And what you might be locating in things like airports, which have universal, people using them. However, on a much more prosaic level, you have the right-hand shot, which shows you one of the now very popular Comfort High toilets. I don't know how you feel about them, but I'm alarmed by the notion that these are now the new standard toilet that we know works so poorly for so many people, short people, a lot of older people who can't abide it, in service of what is a noble goal, which is easier getting on and getting off a toilet. So I wish that the toilet industry could adopt the same flexibility of design that the office chair industry has been able to adopt and has succeeded at largely, of conforming what surely everyone needs a different toilet seat height, being able to make that happen. And you can buy an adjustable height toilet, but again at a very high cost. So it stands as an ongoing issue, but how you address that, which we can maybe talk about another time. Again, our contrast to ping pong between things accessible versus things universal. Very nice accessible kitchen designed for a particular user with a particular set of issues and needs, and certainly nothing that's generalizably sold to a mainstream audience. Nice with some odd features to it. This is one version of a UD kitchen we came up with some years ago in one of the houses that has kind of standard cabinetry, standard cabinet heights, one lowered peninsula out there, standard cabinet height, but it has removable fascia and slide back doors, so you can actually partially adapt it to a seated user. Even though if I was the primary homemaker using a wheelchair, this would not be a good kitchen for me, because there's too many things that are wrong. The counter heights are too long, and it just points out this issue that even today, it's very difficult to design the perfect kitchen that's fully adaptable at low cost from all standing users to primarily seated user. You can go part way, as this thing kind of evidences, but you certainly have a hard time going all the way. This shows some of the functionality of this next to the stove and the range, and reach up sometimes into the bottom cabinet. And later on, what people were using that empty space for after another household moved in there. And I am, where the heck? Okay, let me see if I got this. Okay, I guess we're almost done here. Good. So this is final set of slides is on an apartment project in St. Louis, Missouri, where we used to have our UD conferences. that is quite nice. It's a apartment complex that's got all UD, every unit. It's got some market rates, some subsidized, but they're all the same. And they actually went a little bit overboard in design, went a little bit more seated than I would have preferred given the demographics and who they were seeking. But you've got side-by-side refrigerators, you've got lowered, um, you got wall ovens and raised dishwashers along the side there, which is great for a lot of folks. You've got a two-height center island with a piston-driven adjustable height counter, which is kind of cool. Um, and again, kind of the clean wood styling, and it continues into the bathroom where I generally don't like vacant spaces under sinks where you expect to have cabinetry, but they could get away with it with, if you have a high design concept, sometimes you can break rules you wouldn't otherwise be able to. So in this case, kind of works okay for this perspective. So anyway, so that's my tour. This is give you an introduction of UD, how it came about, the kind of historical perspective. I hope you appreciate the ancient peoples discussion, the more immediate perspective of the legislative underpinnings behind it, and then examples of both the principles and how it plays out, in my opinion, in a residential context. So it still is a very rapid tour through this. I'm happy to answer questions now and get back with Karen with some information later.
And anyone have any questions? Can you hear me, Richard?
Not well.
Darn.
You're very, very choppy.
Duh.
Maybe just me, though.
Well, your presentation came through clearly.
Good. So if I have a minute left, which I think I do just, I'll just say that, you know, my experience with your profession goes back to the earliest days of my working here, having worked with OTs on projects in people's homes, and continues to this day. You know, the question about how an OT relates to a universal kind of home, I think is pretty plain in that most homes will be what I call blended homes. They'll be homes that have some generic universal features, and in many cases, some customized features, particularly custom homes or architect designed homes. And they'll need the kind of information that you all have in your profession, in your training and practice to add to that. Anyway, so I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk to all of you, and I'll follow up with Karen afterwards. So is there anything else?
Well, I want to say thank you, Richard, because what a great presentation. And I really love seeing the different ways things worked, because I always think of things more from a disability perspective, but seeing the different
Sure.
entryways and curb cuts used on so many different levels was just enlightening.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is a different take on this. And if you guys disagree with my perspectives, I'll be happy to have that conversation. Anyway, okay, so that's fine. I'll follow up with you, Karen, on the various areas that I promised in terms of the links and the floor plans, and anything else people have to ask. So I guess I'll sign off. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, everyone's saying thank you. Thank you so much, Richard.
You're welcome.